So these are very, very veteran cars. The oldest cars on the of the weekend, and the oldest cars on this grid are 100 years old. So Patrick Blakeney-Edwards qualified his Fraser-Nash on pole position, and alongside him Gareth Burnett, who we heard from in the RAF Blue Alta Sports. The Alvis Firefly Special of Rudiger Friedrichs should be quick in a straight line as well. That's in third. And Vijay Mallya starts the Fraser-Nash BMW 328 in fourth place. The TT rep of the BBs is in fifth, ahead of Keeling and Lockheed's Delahaye, car number 135. So there's lots of very familiar names and very familiar cars. Bentley 3 litre with 4.5 litre engines sort of dominate the bottom end of the top 10, ahead of a pair of Talbos, and there's a couple of 6-cylinder Alfa Romeo 8Cs as well. The 8C Monza of David Cook in 18th, and the Halusa family's 2300 Zagato, a fabulous looking car with great history in Emilia Emilia and in Targa Florio. Lots of Aston Martins as well. Edward Bradley lost lots of oil and laid a big slick in qualifying on Friday in the family's Aston Martin Ulster. Hopefully that has been repaired and is on the grid. Haven't seen the car in the collecting area because we're up in the commentary box, but hopefully that car will be there. And among all of these four-wheel drive cars, some real behemoths, is the Morgan three-wheeler, which will be highly entertaining as well. Sue Derbyshire and Duncan Wood's Morgan Super Aero, very easy to spot. It's the only one that's not got the right number of wheels on, unless you come from the Morgan family, in which case it's got the perfect number of wheels. So what a variety of different pre-war or between the wars machinery, strictly speaking. The pre-World War II sports car race. Pat Blakeney-Edwards with the black Fraser-Nash on pole position at 1929 car, and a whole decade younger, the RAF Blue car of Gareth Burnett on the outside of the front row, the Alta Sports. And a little further back you can see the Jaguar SS100, easy to spot because it's got twin rear wheels. Now that's normally a hill climbing tweak, but it seems to work well on that car here in circuit racing form as well. Of course, the very, very distinctive upright shape of the Bentleys and the Bentley Tourer. So, 40 minutes with near century-old machinery. Here we go. The BRDC 500 will get underway in a moment here at the Silverstone Festival. The lights go out and it's Patrick Blakeney-Edwards, who on the driver's right in the front row has got a battle on his hands already with Gareth Burnett. The Alta Sport goes into the lead. That's exactly what Patrick Blakeney-Edwards did not want to do. The Alta and the black Alvis Firefly Special of Rudiger Friedrichs that started third, that is behind Blakeney-Edwards in car number 1. Those are the cars that he reckons will be quicker on the straight but slower in the corner. He wanted to be ahead of them if he could, but he didn't manage it. 124 slotting up the inside, the Morley family, one of the Morley family Bentleys, and that is Clive Morley starting that 3 litre chassis with 4.5 litre engine. Vijay Mallya on the inside there, car number 135 of Clive Fidgen in his Fraser-Nash TT replica. And here comes Blakeney-Edwards down the inside, looking to reclaim the lead. He'll have more corner speed, he reckons, than the quick cars, so he gets back in front of Gareth Burnett. And Gareth saying that Patrick was spreading malicious rumour when he suggested the Alta should run away, and looks as though they are set for a ding-dong battle. But Alistair Douglas, this is going to be a long 40-minute race for these cars. As I said, some of these are a century old, and most of them, the youngest, are over 85 years old. So there's a lot you're asking of these vintage machines.
Yeah, I'm the leading car, 95 years old, Patrick Blakeney-Edwards Fraser-Nash, which is a chain-driven, so there's no gearbox and solid drive to the rear wheels. It's chains and sprockets, and the wheels don't rotate at different speeds as you go through a corner. So you might notice Patrick Blakeney-Edwards throwing the car sideways to get it through the corners, and that's very much his style. So he leads from Gareth Burnett in the Alta in second place. But there's the Morgan three-wheeler. That's been started by Duncan Wood, and Sue Derbyshire will take over. Quite a strange-looking machine on track, but very, very effective would you believe, a top speed of 110 miles an hour with 3 wheels.
and nearly 100 years old. Yes, a terrifying thought. And just in front, you can see the two pale pea green Avio 105 turbos. Here's the blue Delahaye. Now that's another fabulous looking device. Ross Keeling shares that with Callum Lockie. Callum and Ross have had a lot of success in that Delahaye. Delahaye 135, that's one of the last of the pre-war Delahaye's. They were a kind of French equivalent of Bentley, really, built very expensive and luxurious sporting cars and went racing with them as well. So it is Patrick Blakeney-Edwards that leads, from Gareth Burnett in second place, Rudiger Friedrichs in third, then in fourth place the green car, that's Robert and Josh Beebe's Fraser-Nash TT replica, which is basically a Fraser-Nash TT, the same as the factory raced in the Tourist Trophy, but it wasn't a factory car, so they sold them as replicas.
And that is actually the very first replica the factory ever built, which is an interesting piece of information we picked up this morning. So the factory basically selling cars that they'd won races with. What was it? Race on Sunday, sell on Monday.
Yes, win on Sunday, sell on Monday. 105 is the AV 105 team car. This is the Talbot of Dan Balfour, and Balfour picks up 10th place from the Getley and Fox machine, and two of those cars, in fact I think almost all of those cars that raced in period at Le Mans have survived the team cars. There you can see another one just in front. That's Michael Birch with the Rubens Barrichello helmet, and again, look at the difference these cars. There's the Fraser-Nash in the middle, and the Talbot, you're sort of looking down almost like from the top deck of a bus at your rival, aren't you? I mean, it's the ridiculous difference between these cars of very, very similar ages. There were a lot of ways to skin a cat between the wars.
And many, many years ago, 1933, that Fraser-Nash we're looking at in the middle of that group of 3 cars, Clive Fidgen's car, had 2 podiums at Brooklands in 1933, and here it is, what's that, 90 years later, still being thrashed around a race circuit.
And under pressure from Nigel Armstrong, the low-slung black car behind is the Aston Martin Speed Special Red Dragon. Why is it called Red Dragon? It's not red, Alistair.
It's because its second owner, I think, anyway, a long time ago, was Dudley Folland, who was a very proud Welshman. So he put the Red Dragon, the symbol of Wales, onto the car, and it's been known as Red Dragon ever since, even though, as you say, it retains its black paintwork.
Yeah. Fabulous sight, these cars swinging through the Beckett's S's, which of course none of them would have raced on in period. Silverstone wasn't opened until post-World War II as a racing circuit, and the Beckett's S is a very much more modern iteration of the circuit. Nevertheless, cars cope with it pretty nicely.
And the Aston Martin, the Red Dragon, was previously, before Dudley Folland owned it, was driven by Richard Seaman, who became a Grand Prix driver for Mercedes in pre-war periods, lost his life at Spa in the Grand Prix there whilst leading, but Dick Seaman in his early days drove this very car.
You can see he's under pressure from the very square-rigged green Talbot, car number 105 of Dan Balfour. Balfour got around the outside but just couldn't quite carry the pace there at Stowe. Loses a little bit of ground in the Vale, and here comes the Aston Martin challenging the Fraser-Nash. The Fraser-Nash giving away capacity. And again, you can see from a lot of these cars why pre-war cars, no matter which country they were made in, were predominantly right-hand drive, because not only was the handbrake on the outside, but so too, there you go, changing gears on the outside in the Fraser-Nash. And that was very much a pre-war way, because of the mechanical linkages and so on, not being inside the car. It didn't have remote gear changes. Lots of them were on the outside of the car, in the same way that a stagecoach in the Wild West would have had the big wooden brake on the outside. Cars did as well. Not everybody ascribed to that, and you can see the Aston Martin there with the exhaust by the driver's elbow on the right-hand side, so you definitely don't want to be reaching out to the right of that.
That's where you put the cup holder to keep your coffee warm, isn't it?
To melt your coffee cup, yes, absolutely. To cook dinner. A little further back, you can see distinctive radiator of one of the Bentleys. I'm not quite sure which of the ones that is, but there goes Alfa Romeo 8C. That's the 8C Monza. Fabulous looking thing, raced in Grand Prix in period. And the 8Cs would have been super fast road cars. They would have been raced in Voiturette racing, in Grand Prix racing, on road races like the Mille Miglia and the Targa Florio, and all sorts of Rome, Brescia Rome, and all sorts of different races. So it's very much a car for all events. Some of the other manufacturers tend to specialise more in pure racing. The 8C can do pretty much anything that its owner wanted. Cracking battle here. Tambalfa just about hanging on. You can see the Talbot swinging its tail around.
Very, very effective cars, these Talbots. As you say, the driver sits very high up, and it's a very sort of thin, tall car, but you'd think it wouldn't handle, but they do handle very well. The Roche Talbots, as they're called, Georges Roche.
And of course the shape of the car, particularly in those days, very much defined by the shape of the engine. And that's why Bentleys are so tall, because if you've ever seen a Bentley engine, or indeed a Bugatti engine out of the car, see how tall they are compared to a modern car. That gives you that big high bonnet. And then the smaller capacity engines didn't have pistons like buckets, and so they didn't have quite such big engines to deal with. Patrick Blakeney-Edwards racing two cars in this race. He's starting this Nash, and then of course he'll be sharing the car that we heard from Vijay Mallya talking about. And again, almost unique feature of the Fraser Nash is that the rear track is quite considerably narrower than the front. And the wider front track gives you better steering, braking and road holding. And the narrower rear end, just that's the way it was. The only road car I can think of that was similar to that, really, certainly in my lifetime, was the Citroën DS, but that was a front-wheel drive car, so it was juggling a whole lot of different eggs in that basket.
Patrick Blakeney-Edwards, very, very experienced in this car, well, in lots of different historic cars, but particularly this one, very well known for Nashes. And as I say, that's chain drive. So when you see him pull that lever or push the lever forward to change gear, what's actually happening is the chain is being moved onto a different cog or sprocket, and that changes the drive to the rear wheels.
This is a Talbot, but a very different Talbot. This is a Talbot Largo, which is a whole different... And how different is this from the same manufacturer? How different is this to the Roche Talbots that we were looking at before? So, Max Sowerby, not sure what the issue was with the Talbot Largo, but he is getting ready to rejoin. Now then, car number 4, the all-red Aston Martin team car. That is the car of Edward Bradley. That's the one that deposited litres of oil in qualifying. Wasn't sure whether that would be on the grid or not, but it is, so that's really good news. So the Bradley family have been racing that Aston Martin Ulster for a number of years. Edward and particularly his son Richard Bradley often sharing the car with him. So good news to see that car out. Didn't quite catch up with them to find out why it had leaked quite so copiously, but if it was major mechanical disaster, I imagine they wouldn't have made it out 48 hours later. So the good news is that probably wasn't that dramatic. Just behind, twiddling the wheel on the Fraser Nash Emerson, the car shared by Jonathan Fenning and Charlie Martin, car number 3. And again, so many different sizes and shapes, easy for me to say, of cars in this field, and it's covering barely a 10-year spread. We see so much of that sort of at the end of the 50s and into the 60s with the front engine, rear engine revolution, but some of these cars are just as distant from each other technically over the same sort of decade-long period.
And with the drivers out there in the breeze, you can see very clearly in the number 35 three-wheel Morgan, the Super Aero, Duncan Wood crouching down in the very small cockpit, just trying to keep his head below that little aero screen to maximise the minimise the wind resistance over the car. Turns into club corner, very big steering wheel. The engine a V-twin, and you can see hanging out the front. It's not under the bonnet, it's actually hanging out at the front. and many of these Morgans have completely exposed valve gear, so you can see the valves going up and down, the springs working away, and the oil being thrown around on the engine.
Sprayed liberally over the driver and passenger as well.
And Sue Derbyshire will be taking that car over later in the race. But that car from 1929, it's chain driven as well, and into the pit lane. Have we got pit window open? No, not yet.
Yeah,
no, I think he was just saying, you can pass me on the right, just keeping out of the way, or is he in trouble?
No, I think the Talbot Lager was coming up. Oh no, maybe he is in trouble, and that would be a real shame, because Sue Derbyshire is always hugely entertaining in this car. Here is a Fraser-Nash that is starting to shed components. So that's a wing that is.
Or is it an exhaust?
Oh, is it? No, it is an exhaust. Yes, that's the entire exhaust that's come off, basically just ahead of the. I would say silencer, but it certainly doesn't silence it. The muffler would be a little bit more accurate. So it does look as though the Morgan has got an issue. Does that mean it has lapsed onto one, in which case there won't be an awful lot of a point in proceeding, not much power to proceed with either.
It's not very heavy to push though, that's one thing. But he's
still a long way to push.
He's still got some sort of forward power, hasn't he? So he's keeping going.
I wonder if it's just lost ignition on one of the cylinders. It is a motorcycle engine, and so it is air cooled, so it's not a water leak or anything else, so it's more likely to be either a fuel or an ignition issue than anything else. Now then, back with cars up at the front of the field, and this is this is Ross Feeling, isn't it, in the Delahaye, and he is currently in 5th position, and just ahead of the first Morley-driven Bentley. Now the Morley families are deeply embedded. I think if you slice them open, it probably has the winged Bentley logo stamped through all of them. Fathers and sons racing in this race are the 3rd and 4th generation of Morley Bentley racers. At least 4 generations, we think, don't we? Who've been racing Bentleys and fixing Bentleys. Anna Getley and Lewis Fox about to do their driver change. You saw the Bentley 3 4.5. What is a 3 4.5? Well, it's a 3-litre Bentley chassis, but with a bigger 4.5-litre engine stuffed in. It was a very popular fix. So there's nothing wrong with the 3-litre chassis, so you didn't need to reinvent the chassis. But when WO introduced a 4.5-litre engine, who doesn't want more power? Of course, everyone wants more power. So is that Clive Morley that started?
Yes.
It is Clive Morley that started.
Father Clive and Stuart and James. James will take this one over. Stuart racing in the number 9 Bentley. So all 3 of them, father and 2 sons, out on track. And Bentley are
up the inside.
Bentley are celebrating 100 years since they won the Le Mans 24 Hours for the first time in 1924. The 2nd year of the running of the great race, and then they won again in 27, 28, 29 and 30, and then as many people will remember, in 2003 in the wonderful Speed 8. But in the 24 to 30, Bentley were in most years either dominant or very much in the mix for a win.
Just saw a driver change in a Bentley 3-litre without a 4.5-litre engine. That's George Elban and Duncan Wiltshire, car number 46, the blue Bentley. So the pit window is definitely open. Either that or some people are going to have a lot of explaining to do. Here's the twin-wheeled Jaguar SS100. Twin rear wheels. It's very popular in hill climbing because there you need maximum grip for a very short period of time. And so twin rear wheels definitely worked. But that SS100 does seem to work pretty effectively here. Doesn't stop it getting sideways either.
And it's the name of Jaguar pre-Second War was Swallow Sidecars, and shortened to SS, but for obvious reasons it wasn't a terribly popular name on the Jaguar board, so they changed the name to Jaguar, which was actually one of their cars that in their fleet, in their range of cars that they made was a Jaguar, so they changed the name to Jaguar, and but this is known as the SS100, Jaguar SS100, to keep things clear, but actually would have been SS at the time.
And Swallow sidecars, by the way, nothing to do with Swallow Duretti, as we saw in the drivers' parade, the retro run parade a little earlier on. That was a Triumph-based car built in Italy, if I remember correctly. I probably don't. This is the Riley Brooklands car number 15 of Nigel Dowding.
And that actually won the very first New Zealand Grand Prix.
And there's a period tweak as Edward Bradley goes past it and dials in some more opposite lock. The period tweak I'm talking about is not a random flashing indicator, but these cars with their big headlamps turned around backwards. So you quite often see this in period photos of things like Alfa Monzas racing, 8C Alphas, the headlamps around backwards for two reasons. First of all, a tiny little bit more aerodynamic. It looks like it should be quicker. May not be, but the other thing it does is it stops flying stones, and there were lots of those in those days, breaking your headlamps, so you have to go and get a new glass. And why were there lots of flying stones? Because in this period, roads were not tarmacked. They were not roads as we understand them. They were basically gravel tracks, hard compressed gravel tracks, even many big roads, and certainly if you're racing on road circuits at Le Mans and so on in the 20s, they were dirt roads with oil or tar spread on them to try and basically keep the dust down and hold some of the aggregate together. But once you've got racing cars like these churning them up, then yeah, flying stones and broken goggles and injured eyes were very, very common indeed.
And we're looking here at the battle for second place. Patrick Blakeney-Edwards has built up a sizable lead, but Gareth Burnett still under challenge from Rudy Friedrichs. We saw this right at the start of the race, and still this battle goes on. Rudy, look, crouching down in the cockpit of the car, great big steering wheel, turns in, he's ahead of Gareth Burnett as they turn in. It's not one turn in to Stowe Corner, is it? It's about 10.
And it's like stitching, it's like he's knitting, basically. Hands moving up and down and up and down and up and down. The Bentley behind, the Bentley Tourer, just being lapped. Again, yeah. Oh, busy, busy, busy. So that's where the position changed. So Rudiger Friedrichs was ahead of Gareth Burnett and just had a bit of a moment there going into Copse Corner. And that is the Delahaye, and that is a real shame. So Callum Lockie won't get to drive that car. That was going very well indeed. Now slowing down for very obvious and smoky reasons.
That may be the source of what we think is a little bit of oil up at Abbey. We've picked up on our fixed cameras that some cars have been running wide there.
Very much a road-looking car, the Old English White, or cream car in the middle. That is car number 114. That is the Invicta low chassis. So a low-slung chassis for the sporty Invicta driver, and Invicta again a mark that did not survive the hostilities of World War II, but a mark rival for the likes of Bentley in the 30s. They built very exclusive, very expensive, high-performance cars. And of course, post-war, there wasn't as huge a market as there might have been, and Invicta were a very small boutique manufacturer, you would probably say these days, so didn't really have much sort of manufacturing going on in World War II either, and they disappeared from the scene. Pat Blakeney-Edwards, the race leader, comes in. No seatbelts to be done up in these cars. And
just a minimum stop time of 15 seconds in this race, so they have to come into the pits between 15 and 30 minutes into the race, which is now, but they only have to stop for 15 seconds.
Again, many of our more modern race cars have a mandatory 60-second stop. That's because seatbelts, hands devices and everything else have to be accommodated, and to allow for genuine safety there is a minimum pit stop time of around 60 seconds for most of our races. Not all of them are two-driver races, but for those that are. But as here, safety is in the eye of the beholder in the 1920s, so there are no seatbelts. They hadn't yet been invented, really. Even flyers didn't have belts at this stage. The only thing you had was a parachute and hopefully the chance to escape your aircraft.
We're looking at Rudy Friedrichs and Gareth Burnett coming down into Stowe, and if we hold the shot on, no, we're going to Gareth, so we'll see him come through Stowe, and then the rest of the field streaming down the Hanger Straight. But if you're trackside, just keep an eye on Rudy Friedrichs, car number 8, because he is one of the most spectacular drivers. He keeps the car moving around, sawing at the wheel.
2 red cars coming towards us, the first of which is the Alfa Romeo 2300 Zagato, so it's another 8C, but it is more of a road spec looking car rather than a purebred racer like the 8C Monza. So the same 8-cylinder engine, predominantly the same underpinnings, but as you can see, looks much more like a sporting road car rather than the Monza, which has got much more of a racing look. And behind him was car number 4, and that was Edward Bradley in the Aston Martin Ulster.
Back to the Friedrichs Burnett battle for second place. Coming into Village, and that big steering wheel, Rudy working away, turns into the left-hander at the loop, turns in once, turns in twice, opposite lock on the exit, and drifts the car out, as does Gareth Burnett in the Alta Sports just behind in third place.
More cars drifting in and out of the pit lane. I would imagine these two are likely to come in together. And having stopped and handed over car number 1 to Chris Ward, Pat Blakely-Edwards having a rub down with a damp copy of the Telegraph and a cup of tea as he waits for Vijay Mallya to come in. Vijay down in 26th position in the Fraser-Nash BMW. BMW, the 327, 328 series, the Baroque Angels of between the walls cars, not only providing the motive power for those Fraser-Nashes, but of course the engine, the 2-litre BMW engine that replaced the V8 in the 327, that became the inspiration, let's say, for the 2-litre post-war Bristol engine, which was used in road and race cars. Just checking. She's stopped the start watch and checking the time.
Charlie is due in.
Yep, there you go, handbrake on. Outside handbrake, outside gear lever.
Quite a relaxed changeover there. Charlie Martin taking over from Jonathan Fenning in the Fraser-Nash.
Jonathan giving some cogent words of advice. Handbrake released. There you can see the gear lever pulled out and jostled sideways to select first gear. So it's not the standard H-pattern gearbox. And of course, in this pre-war period, not everybody had entirely been convinced by what we now consider to be the natural arrangement of pedals. Accelerator on the right, brake in the middle, clutch on the left. A number of these cars may well have the centre throttle, which was all the rage, don't you know, once upon a time. So Pat Blakely-Edwards led in car number 1, the Fraser-Nash Supersports. Chris Ward has taken it over, and the Morley's Bentley has stopped, but Rudiger Friedrichs and Gareth Burnett continue. They have yet to make their pit stops. Both are driving solo, so that won't make their pit stop any shorter, but will make it less of a getting in and getting out affair and burning your legs on the red hot exhaust. Yeah, stepping over that into the Aston Martin. So again, Aston Martin, a company that has sort of teetered on the edge a number of times in its career. The name, a combination of the founder's name, that's where the Martin comes from, and one of his favourite events, the Aston Clinton Hill Climb, which has been revived in recent years. I believe is happening, did it happen last weekend or is it next weekend? Very, very soon anyway, this time of year, just outside Princess Risborough.
And in shot now is the car number 37, which apart from being one of the original Aston Martin team cars, LM4, is being driven by none other than Darren Turner, who, of course, to many of you will be very, very familiar as a works Aston Martin driver in GT racing, and of course in what did we call it then, LMP1,
Yep.
top class racing with Aston Martin a few years ago at Le
This will
Mans.
definitely be the slowest and oldest Aston Martin he's ever driven around Silverstone.
But if you ask Darren how he likes to drive this car, he just big smile across his face. He absolutely loves it. It's owned by Jonathan Lupton, who started it. Very, very original, with a beautiful rebuild about 3 years ago. One of the cars that was entered by Aston Martin for Le Mans in the LM4, so they were in pairs, LM1 and 2, and then a couple of years later LM3 and 4. And this is one of those original cars. And Darren Turner at the wheel, and I suspect it will start to move up through the order a little. He is one of the quicker drivers out there, but the car itself not competitive against some of the more sporty vehicles like this Alta that Gareth Burnett is driving.
But again, it's giving away nearly a decade in terms of performance and development. The Aston Martin team car from 1930, Gareth Burnett's Alta from 1939. Oh, abandoned ship, bailing out of the Bentley.
Oh, that's the Morley
is
Bentley.
Clive and James Morley's car, so that's James.
That's very unusual to see a Morley car in technical problems.
Yeah. Well, I can immediately see what the issue might be there, because that's not a Morgan, but it is definitely a three-wheeler.
Yes,
Yeah. So, are we looking out the window to see where the wheel has gone? No, we're not. But the car has come to a halt. That's where the wheel has gone.
it's at Abbey, so right and left, fast corner. That must have been
Quite a
a
worry.
moment.
Yes, absolutely.
Where is my wheel?
But yeah, well, I would imagine that he had a big old moment. He probably started coming down the straight. He probably felt something was a bit odd, because it will have, the spinner, which is that's the wheel nut basically that holds the entire thing on. It's a single hub in the middle, so it's like a modern single nut wheel nut you'll see on a Formula 1 car. So the same in racing for ease of changing. It will have worked itself loose, and he will have felt something's odd, and then turned into Abbey and whoa, something's very odd. So he may well have had a big warning just before the wheel parted company. I think if it had let go in Abbey, it would have had a very different result indeed. So good to see him able to control the car, bring it to a halt and leg it, but with 10 minutes on the clock, safety car will come out. So all of Patrick Blakeney-Edwards' hard work will be undone, and that 37-second advantage over the battle for second place will be compressed.
Chris Ward now at the wheel of Patrick Blakeney-Edwards, Fraser Nash. Chris Ward, an extremely experienced historic driver, and I noticed a few laps ago we had a shot of him coming out of club corner, and he was lots and lots of opposite lock, just dialing himself in as that rather sad-looking Bentley.
That is a sorry sight, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, hopefully in the end, not actually that much damage. I think the hub will probably not see service again, but you never know. I mean, if it was just slightly cross-threaded, then the wheel, the spinner, might have suffered more damage than the hub itself.
98 years old, that car.
And I'm afraid, looking at it there with sort of saggy and slightly loose at the seams.
Well, the pit window is now closed. Everybody that needed to do a stop has done their stop.
Which is everybody.
Which is everybody except for the ones that retired before the pit stop.
Yes, indeed.
So nobody missed their pit window as far as we know.
Yes, even if you're driving solo, you still have to stop. So the stop is mandatory. Driver change is not necessarily mandatory. 144.
Paul Potchgill.
It is.
The Bentley Tourer from 1924, and the 99 shared car started by Anna Gettley and now driven by Lewis Fox. That's the 3.5, so another one of those 3-litre chassis with the, why wouldn't you put a 4.5-litre engine in it?
There's the car started by Vijay Mallya, so Patrick Blakeney-Edwards at the wheel of the Fraser Nash 328.
Tucked the Telegraph into the side pocket in the car, after having had a read. 135, and Vijay actually appeared in that car. I think it was 2 years ago for the first time I saw him, and an extremely enthusiastic competitor in historic racing these days.
He's just extremely enthusiastic about life, isn't he?
Yes,
yes.
Yeah. I mean, after running the Force India team and all the well-documented issues there, it must be quite a relief to come out and race with like-minded individuals in historic racing. There's the safety car waiting now to pick up the leader, which is Chris Ward.
Certainly not in the pool of piranhas here. So the field closes up. Yes, get on with it, says the Alfa Romeo driver. Come on. So the Aston in front is not entirely going as quick as some of those behind would like.
Chris Ward actually second in the queue.
Yes, but the race leader.
Yes, so they and the twin wheel Jaguar SS100 immediately behind. Somewhere further down the queue will be the second and third placed cars, which were battling, but they won't be immediately behind Chris.
So that Aston has been waved by. It's another Aston Martin Ulster. And there is Chris Ward in the Fraser Nash, the chain gang Nashes. And of course, this is not now in race order, this is just in the order that the cars were on track in. So, Gareth Burnett and Rudiger Friedrichs, although the gap will close down, there will be machinery in the way. I think the Aston Martin driver is actually having a little bit of a problem. This is the Marion Stock and Bartosz Belicki Aston Martin International 1930 car. I'm not sure that the driver is quite sure what to do, and it being waved on vigorously by the safety car. What am I supposed to do? What are you trying to tell me? On the BRDC 500, a nod to the fabulous Brooklands-based 500-mile races. The race that took place in October in 1929. So a lot of these cars of absolutely the right period.
It was actually the very first race run by the BRDC, which was at the time had different words for that shortened BRDC rather than the British Racing Drivers Club, but it was the Bentley Boys, and they decided they wanted to run a race meeting at Brooklands in 29 and called it and it was a 500-mile race, so it was called the BRDC 500.
Dudley Benjafield was one of the leading lights behind that, one of the driving forces, wasn't he?
Absolutely.
Very much. It was very much a social gathering group as much as everything else. And of course, in those days, racing motor cars or riding horses or going for dinner were seen as a pretty much equal part of the day. And that continued very much through into the 40s and the 50s, before a more professional breed of racing teams and racing drivers took sway in the late 50s and into the 1960s. Red flags are out.
Yeah.
And that then, I'm afraid, is a curtail end to the race. But it does mean that Patrick Blakeney-Edwards and Chris Ward end up probably where they would have done on the podium, on the top step with Gareth Burnett and there Rudiger Friedrichs finishing in second and third. It will be counted back to the end of the previous completed lap when the safety car was scrambled. Not enough, I'm afraid, to reinsert the Morleys into their pre-calamity position. But I don't think we're going to see an awful lot of changes. A couple of cars have in fact toodled into the pit lane, because going slowly on a hot sunny day after they've been ragged for about 40 minutes is probably not doing the best of things for some of the cooling systems. But they've now seen the red flag, so anybody who was a long way back trying to catch the queue of the safety car and was coming around through Luffield has headed into the pit lane. The rest of them will do so shortly as well. The safety car will lead them to the line. And, saluting the marshals and the crowd. And the safety car will lead them to the line. And saluting the marshals and the crowd. 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 And salu cars returning to the Heritage pit lane here. I'm sure those of you who are watching trackside have enjoyed some very different sounding machinery, some very different exhaust notes to what we heard from our 2-litre air-restricted Formula 3 cars the previous race, and indeed to the small capacity Formula Juniors as well. A lot of these cars with some, you know, you particularly think of things like the Bentleys with great big thumping engines, the 4.5 litres in 4 cylinders. That's a lot of recirculating mass and some very different exhaust notes. Well, as the cars head back towards the collecting area, Bryn will be getting his notes in a row, and the race has been concluded.
Iconic auctioneers are once again back here at the Silverstone Festival. They brought an amazing array of cars here, and to tell us more, I'm delighted to have Rob Hubbard here. Now, before we get into the cars, Rob, who comes here to buy cars at a festival like this?
So the festival buyers here can be racers who are out on the track, enthusiasts as well who are here on the club stands, as well as some investors in the marketplace as well. So lots of people, lots of choice.
An eclectic array of prospective buyers and an eclectic array of cars on display as well. Let's start here, shall we, at the Skylines. There's 2 Skylines side by side.
Yeah, absolutely. The R34 Skylines, they really have taken off over the last few years. The JDM market has increased wildly, and rightly so.
Absolutely rightly so. And then next to them, I quite love the contrast between the Skylines and the 2 Aston Martins, very different Aston Martins on display.
Yeah, absolutely. You've got the more modern V12 Screamers, the more modern Gaydon built cars, as well as the earlier V8s, the big bruisers, the love muscle, as they say on the bonnet, and the big air scoops. Great things.
Screamers and bulky beasts there going around. And then when we think of the more classic cars, there's an E-Type here on display. Very popular E-Types, but I love this Bentley. This is absolutely stunning.
Yeah, they really are. Yeah, this is a 1922 3-litre Bentley with a 4.5 litre engine, supercharged as well, and that's one of the original 50 blowers engines that were made famous by Tim Birkin and various others at Le Mans back in the late 20s, early 30s. This car's ready to go. Race it here with legends this weekend, or indeed the VSCC throughout the year, or fast road rallies and everything else like that. So lots you can do with it. It's
an amazing, amazing looking car. I'll put you on the spot though. If you could take home only one car, which one's it going to be?
For me, Maserati Vignale Spider, one of 6 right-hand drive cars.
Just over there. It's beautiful. But I'll tell you what, this has got a guide price of £400,000 to £500,000. So Rob, I think I'll take this one.
So much to see and do here at the Silverstone Festival. If you're here at the circuit and you haven't been here for the rest of the weekend, as well as our racing, we've got all sorts going on. We've got the kitchen live tent, we've got the tasting tents, and the eBay stage now currently running the prize pit stops. Mike and Elvis will be running their car clinics during the course of the day. There's music from the West End Kids and the Northampton Sings Out Choir. And of course, later on in the day, Mike and Elvis will be answering your car questions as much as they can. Let's see if you can catch them out. And then this evening, the music will start at 5:45 from Furnace and the Fundamentals. ADMT on stage at 6:45. And Ollie Murs will round out the weekend at 8:10. Well, we've just seen a fun and action-packed BRDC 500 for MRL pre-war sports cars that raced in periods, and of a type that raced in period from 1924 to 1939. So period surrounding the BRDC 500 mile race at Brooklands, and very much evoking that spirit. It was a dominant performance from car number 1, Pat Blakeney-Edwards and Chris Ward. The Morgan that was suspected to go well in the hands of Sue Derbyshire retired. Not everybody got all of their car to the line. Edward Bradley's Aston Martin Ulster That blew up in qualifying. It was back here, and a great battle between Gareth Burnett and Rudiger Friedrichs for second place. Finally settled in favour of the Blue Alta Sports of Gareth Burnett. Started second, finished second. Rudiger Friedrichs started third, finished third. But it was Pat Blakeney-Edwards and Chris Ward who were leading when James Morley's Bentley shed a wheel, and it just proved too difficult to rescue the car with cars moving quickly. A safety car was brought out, and then with some oil needing to be cleared up, the race has been red flagged. So the results, Pat Blakeney-Edwards and Chris Ward, the winners from Gareth Burnett and Rudy Friedrichs. The BB's Fraser Nash TT rep ahead of the similar car of Fidgen and Williams. And Michael Birch bringing the AV 105 Talbot home in 6th position ahead of the best of the Bentleys. The Aston Martin Speed Red Dragon in 9th place, and the twin rear wheel Jaguar SS100 rounding out the top 10. A lap back, despite losing that wheel, Clive and James Morley's Bentley in 12th position, and lots of mouth-watering machinery in the race, dating back to to exactly 100 years old. So the youngest cars were in their mid-90s, and the oldest were 100 years old. And still, very few in terms of mechanical retirements.